half of the people there are young people getting started. You know, like you're not gonna feel like you're out of place in a place where everybody else has grown up. Like everybody going to work there, everybody.
Barry's connecting to the audio.
Exactly.
He got lucky, his first year roommate from college also got a job there, so they're gonna be sharing an apartment, so that makes the transition a little easier, you know?
Yeah.
Sima, there's Barry.
Oh, no, they're not high, 2-bedroom apartments only $4,000. That's why I'm glad he got
Hi,
it.
Barry, good to see you again, twice in one day.
Hi, Barry.
And Phyllis, you are signed on as 477903. You're muted.
4601.
There you go. Yeah, we don't have your name up there, but I assumed it was somebody who was supposed to be here.
Hello.
Hi, Stuart.
Hello all.
Oh, my goodness.
Coffee and donuts.
Oh,
Coffee.
wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a nice
Bunch of-
surprise.
Bunch of rumbling Jews, we couldn't have any more of that.
So have some coffee, grab a donut.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Very nice. What a nice surprise. Thank you both.
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
good.
she didn't give us eight.
6. Well, we'll split them.
You know, we could get a knife and cut them in
Give me
half.
a couple more.
Oh, there they are.
There they are. They're here.
Okay, well, we could use the other
This
half
is
of
the
the box.
advantage to showing up in person. Those of you who are online have to get your own donuts
Very.
and your own coffee.
I'll go get a knife.
I don't know if she gave me a napkin, so we'll have to do with the towel.
Thank you. Should we cut these in half, Tom?
Sure.
Oh, have a knife or no? I can
Barry
quickly
pulls
go
out a
get one.
switchblade.
I do not want to demonstrate.
You got prepared.
I just watched it.
Just watch it.
Please.
Oh my God. I will use a paper towel so I don't get my hands on the donuts.
So funny.
I'm already making a mess.
Okay. Lee, we see your forehead,
Here, let me, you want something?
just the top of your head. I see that your whole face is there.
Decaf.
Kylie,
No, I'm good.
who wants coffee?
I'll get some decaf.
I'll bring it to you.
Oh, you have your
Select your half a donut.
Ooh, oh, where are we? With the carcass.
Hey, Shelley.
Cream?
As I promised, the air conditioning is working full force.
Oh, my gosh.
Cream.
Chocolate and we have chocolate.
I think this chocolate has filling, Rabbi.
I'm sorry?
You want some decaf?
Oh, no, thank you. Well, yeah, sure, why not?
Okay,
Thank
what do you take in it?
Just black, please.
So what do you guys think? It's very hot.
All right, Stuart,
It's very
I'd
hot
like
here.
this off as best as I
Right, you know what?
can.
Today it's 20 degrees cooler in Vegas than it is
Oh,
in
here's
here.
more towels.
But by the time we
My
get there, I'm
hands are
sure.
You.
Drink coffee.
We're
I
not
do
leaving
not,
until
but I
22.
certainly eat.
You want a donut?
No, thank you.
That's
See, I need to
hot.
we need to be on the
I know, but.
Okay. All right,
Hi.
here we go.
Oh,
And here. Thank you. I'm gonna be in your building tomorrow.
hands.
You are fantastic. I had to water my girlfriend's.
Where are you?
Can I get a hug?
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
We're on Marla.
She's fine.
She's on fire. Everybody had a good,
She's
Everybody
fine,
was
and she's
well?
all, she's on the corner.
great.
So,
All
that's
the way,
dance.
like if you get
What
off
are you doing?
the,
Here's coffee.
you get off the elevator.
You want some-
She's a, anyone else?
I'll take that.
We know she's a great.
You get off the elevator and you make a right-hand turn.
Yeah. A dark
And
and
you go
a
down.
beautiful little boy.
Down the
What
hall.
else would he be?
All the way down.
Right?
I think
They're
it's
all-
505.
And is
that hair looking red?
Well, you get off the
No.
elevator and we're the first
I
doorway
think he's gonna end
from
up
the elevator.
From the elevator.
like, well, that's what his daddy's adore. But
And
it would, I would
give us
love
a
it to
shout when
have
you're in
red
the
hair.
building. If we're around,
Are you
we'll.
playing bridge?
Oh,
Yeah,
Online.
both online. I just started playing. Turns out Temple Jeremiah has a game here on Wednesday nights. I can't play today, not for working people. So I came on Wednesday night.
What kind of game was it?
It was small, but very good players. So enjoyable.
Good.
Small but quality.
So how long is she gone for?
Oh, just a couple of days.
Come
But
come tomorrow.
Oh, would you like some coffee, Derek?
Concerned about, help myself,
There's
thank you.
a spot right here.
It's gonna be so hot that,
Say it again. It's gonna be so hot.
And donuts.
That, I told her I would come and water the plants outside, because it's outside, she is outside.
well, I'm here.
Okay, I do too, yeah.
Are you facing
It's all good.
east?
Are you doing the
I'll talk to you.
transport donuts?
No, we don't face east.
No, I
We face,
We
no.
face east.
had lunch with Ruth.
It's like towards the lake, that's east.
Well, okay, I face east.
The door.
And they asked.
I was gonna say, no, we face, off
When
to
to be
the,
remembered.
Yeah, they.
oh, yeah, I guess, you know, you guys.
You were sitting over there
Yeah.
last week.
Yeah, we have downtown,
Uh-huh.
we're not like on the lake, so we have downtown and then a neighborhood and then,
Right,
yeah,
Yeah.
northwestern.
John,
Yeah, east. It's east. Oh, it's always right.
But yes, I said it was the other east.
The other east, that's right.
The other.
Growing up in Chicago, it messes you up when you go to California
Oh, but you're like,
because the water is on the wrong side.
New York too, the sun sets and rises on the wrong side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was driving, I was visiting a friend and I borrowed his car because I wanted to go to the ocean.
oh, God.
I started driving east
Yeah.
and I didn't get to the ocean, I got to the mountains. I said, this doesn't seem right. A long time ago,
Yeah.
a long time ago. And then what really messed me up was my first pulpit was in Norfolk, Virginia. And the water is everywhere. So it just, you can't
Sure.
guide yourself by where the body of water is because Hampton Roads refers to the waterways. And it's just one mess. No streets run straight because the water interrupts everything. It's beautiful, but it's very confusing. At least it was confusing to me. But we did make it to the hospital on time for the births of both of our sons. So that was good. So we didn't get so hopelessly lost that we were running into difficulty with getting
Same
Kathy to the
hospital?
hospital. Same hospital, Virginia Beach Hospital.
Oh, well, you learned but from the first time.
Yeah, it's kind of a straight shot. So that I didn't have to worry about so much. Although I was still worried. Because it was the only way to get to Virginia Beach. And it's traffic, you're
You're stuck.
stuck and there aren't any bypasses because it's all water. So you just.
That's a problem, unless she wants to swim.
Oh, my goodness. All right, friends, there are more people that were signed on for tonight. And so thank you again, Stuart and Janine, for the coffee and the donuts. Very, very good. So what I wanted to do, we spent time looking at, for the most part, chapter 19, which is the setup of Exodus, the setup for the experience at Sinai. And what I wanted to do is to keep that in mind, to keep in mind, in particular, the phrase Bayom Hazeh, right? That it was on this day, right? Not on that day. And that figured very large for our sages of blessed memory, and I think for us as well. Again, this course flows out of our recent observance of the Festival of Shavuot, the Festival of the Giving and the Receiving of Torah, and to really think about, as Reformed Jews, how do we imagine Sinai? What role does that story play for us, right? For some, there are Reformed Jews who think of that as a literal event. And for the majority of us, we don't necessarily think of it as a literal event, at least as described in Torah, but a powerful core story of our people that we continue to talk about. We continue to talk about Mount Sinai. We continue to talk about Moses coming down the mountain with the tablets. Ernie Schubert sent me the clip from the Ten Commandments, the Cecil B. DeMille version. And Ernie, you probably know this. I learned this not too long ago, that the way that Cecil B. DeMille created the effect of the Red Sea of Reeds parting was filming it closing and then reversing the film, right? So it appears that it is opening when indeed it's just the film running backwards. So back in the day, before CGI and all the other technology that is available to filmmakers and videographers, the other thing that I know of there are two other things that I know about Ten Commandments trivia. The other thing is that if you look very carefully, there's maybe a second or two when Charlton Heston is holding the tablets aloft, that his sleeve comes down and he's wearing a watch. He's wearing a watch. And the other thing that I've learned, and because the world is on fire, we don't hear about this as much, the public display of the Ten Commandments, right, in courts, in public buildings, was advertising. It came from advertising. It did come from people of faith saying we should, have this symbol of, morality and justice front and center in our government buildings and in our courthouses. It was a very, very savvy advertising campaign orchestrated by Cecil B. DeMille. So unintended consequences. He did not imagine that it would become a focal point for culture wars, right? So there we are. And Charlton Heston was president of the NRA. So, go figure. So, all right. Enough of the trivia. So in setting this up, in kind of thinking about not only the story itself at Sinai, but the setup to the story, and what are we supposed to take away from that? What are we supposed to imagine? Both in the lead up in chapter 19 and then in chapter 20, after the 10 utterances, right, concluding with "Don't covet anything that belongs to your neighbor," the response of the Israelites. So again, what I wanted to do is just to review. If you have the Chumash in front of you, what we're looking at is chapter 20, and beginning really on verse 400 at page 480, with verse 15. And what I'm going to do is first let Hershey into the meeting, and then I'm going to go to my handy dandy. Okay, so now I am going to go back to Zoom and share my screen and put up my Exodus 20 for all of you who are online who may not have a Chumash at the ready. And again, you'll see that here, beginning with verse 15, all the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the blare of the horn and the mountain smoking, right? And when the people saw it, they fell back and stood at a distance, right? We had a little bit of a taste of that last night with the thunder and the lightning and the wind and the ground kind of vibrating at this. And so they say used to be there, so they're terrified, right? They fell back and stood at a distance. This is a very scary thing that's happening to them. You speak to us, they said to Moses, and we will obey, but let not God speak to us lest we die. So you'll remember that in chapter 19, God sets up boundary, right? They can't touch the mountain. If they touch the mountain, they'll die. They've fallen away from it, and now they're fearful even that hearing God's voice is going to cause their death, right? Very dramatic, the whole thing, right? We will obey, right? Whatever you speak to us, Moses, whatever you say, we'll do. We know, of course, that this is going to be nonsense because it's a very stiff-necked, very rebellious people. Moses answered the people, "Be not afraid, For God has come only in order to test you, and in order that the fear of God may be ever with you, so that you do not go astray. Right? This is quite an answer. You're being tested. That all of these pyrotechnics there are a part of this test. What God is testing, we are not sure, right? What is God testing here would be a question to ask. In order that the fear of God may ever be with you so that you do not go astray, that it's the fear of God. And fear, again, is not a great translation, right? Because the word yirah in Hebrew can be translated as awe, right? A-W-E, right? And so it's not so much scared afraid as in acknowledging the awesome nature, right? Acknowledging God's awesomeness, God's omniscience, God's omnipotence, the infinite presence of God. It should be an awe-inspiring experience. And if you carry that with you, you will not go astray, right? That's the premise here. That's the setup. And that all of the pyrotechnics were not meant to scare the people necessarily, but to inspire them, right? In a way that perhaps would be recognizable to them, that, you know, this is this demonstration of God's power with the thunder and the lightning and the ground shaking and all of this and the smoke. You know, I always go back to the Wizard of Oz, right? And that, you know, the great machinery that this man has put together to inspire fear, awe in the subjects of Oz, right? And so in a sense, it seems a little bit like that's the atmosphere that's being created. That's the experience that's being set up for our ancestors. So the people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick cloud where God was, right? We don't want to do it, Moses. You do it, right? You be our guide. And so God said to Moses, "Thus shall you say to the Israelites, you yourself saw that I spoke to you from the very heavens." Right? So God is saying, remind them of what has just happened, what their experience is. "With me, therefore, you shall not make any gods of silver, nor shall you make for yourselves any gods of gold." Right? Talk about foreshadowing, right? This is, okay. "Make for me an altar of earth and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your sacrifices of well-being, and your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you. And if you make for me an altar of stones, do not build it of hewn stones, for by wielding your tool upon them, you have profaned them. Do not ascend my altar by steps, that your nakedness may not be exposed upon it." So there are several things that flow from this experience, right? Part of it is to differentiate perhaps this deity from the other deities that they may have encountered in their sojourn in Egypt, what other people were doing, right? Where, you know, fancy stuff, gold and, you know, images and statues and all of that was a part of it. And God is saying, well, not so with me. Right? Your experience of me is going to be fundamentally different than what you've seen other people's do. Right? What is the norm of the day? And in fact, the altar that you use to communicate with me should be a very modest altar, right? Made out of earth, you know, made out of stone perhaps. And if you make it out of stone, you know, be careful. Don't use an implement of war, of violence to make this. Right? So again, flowing from this is that it already seems to be establishing a connection that, the idea that this Sinai event possibly is a one-time event where you're going to hear and experience God in this way. From now on, when you communicate with me, it's going to be in a mode that you understand, which is bringing offerings because you've seen other people do this, but you're going to do it differently than other people. And where you do it is going to be done differently. And by the way, show some modesty, right? Imagining the garments that they were wearing and not necessarily having boxers or briefs or panties on, that, they were covered, but if you're walking up steps, the robes open, and be aware of that. This is not your house where you can walk up and down steps and the people in your house, that this is going to be a different kind of experience. So it's laying out what's happening now and how you then translate it, right? So it is a little bit, to my mind, of whiplash. Right? So you've had this grand explosive experience of God, and like a tangible experience, right? Direct and empirical revelation of God. Everybody's experiencing it. It's not, some person off in the forest and, coming back and saying, I talked to God, right? This is everybody seeing and hearing. And here at this last part, this kind of coda to the 10 utterances, it seems to be actually only Moses who's going to be hearing God. Okay, so let me pause for a moment. Questions, comments, rebuttals? Alan?
It's kind of amazing that it appears that at least for a short time, people kind of recognize with what was being said. I relate it to today in thinking about global warming. And this is the message that this is what can happen. This is what's happening. And yet, are we heeding that message? Are we doing anything about it?
Yes. Yeah. That it is, it's terrifying and maybe to a certain extent paralyzing, right? We can't do anything. You do it. You're the leader. You take care of this. Right, kind of a thing. And yeah, I think there's some parallel here for sure. Stuart?
Just a couple of things caught my attention. And one is the beginning of verse 19, and it says, thus shall you say to the Israelites, you yourselves saw that I spoke to you from the very heavens. Then 20, with me, therefore you shall not make any gods of silver, etc. And it seems to me that there's a differentiation being made right there of a differentiation between heaven or the eternal that broke through and made the decision to speak to the Israelites, whether directly or through Moses, and the earth, represented by things that are brought out from the earth, like gold and silver, but also the notion that in those times, people who worked with those things were like sorcerers, smelters, and people who worked with those things were considered to be associated with dark powers,
Yes.
sometimes demonic powers. I can't even say it.
We believe
Thothian powers of the earth. And this is a God not of the earth, but a God, who expresses himself through various devices, but is the God of the heavens, and earlier said that all the earth is mine. But there's a clear differentiation being made here. And also it's the notion of fear. I think it also goes to the concept of kavod. And sometimes we think of kavod in one way, but in these times, kavod was like God's total otherness. So God expresses himself not in human ways, but through the means that are available for humans to understand, thunder, lightning, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, yes, and I think that what is evolving here is the sense of, the expectation is that the deity is transcendent, right? And exists up and above. And what's beginning to unfold here, or continuing to unfold here, is the sense that no, that's not the only realm of God, right? That's not the only place where God dwells. That in fact, when the Mishkan is built, the tabernacle is built, God says, build it so that I might dwell among you, not in it, right? And that's a further kind of movement of helping the people understand that it's not just in a particular place. And that, again, I think, and building, Stuart, on what you said, that it's that the altar is going to be of the earth. So that's going to be a connecting point, right? For our ancestors, it was certainly the expectation, and that of trying to disengage from what was familiar from other cultures, what other people were doing, how other people were worshiping, how they were thinking, how they related to their God, and the people who ministered to that God. Right? I mean, you talked about the sorcerers, and that the priests were not sorcerers. Right? The priests had a particular job. They knew how to do this, but it wasn't a book of secrets, right? All the instructions were given to everybody of what the priests were supposed to do. So it was, in many ways, demystifying that sacrificial cult, right? The worship of God through offerings and transforming it. So again, taking a familiar medium of communication and radically changing it from what the experience was of other cultures at the time and what the Israelite experience was like for 430 years in Egypt, and being steeped in that Egyptian religion and in that way. So yeah, I think that it's, what we're witnessing here is the struggle to understand that on the part of our ancestors, right? The struggle to learn, and they're just, whatever you say, Moses, because this is terrifying, and that's not going to last very long, because it never does. But it's part of that growth, right? Yeah, Shelley.
I found this so interesting. What did they hear? All at Mount Sinai, young and old, women, children, and.
Okay, so wait, Shelley, let me direct everybody to
Okay.
to where you're looking, and you're on page 2 of the handout in the middle, and this is the passage from the Midrash from Exodus Rabbah, chapter 5:9. If anybody needs an extra copy, I've got extra copies. Is that what you?
I brought the wrong one.
Ah, okay. You're welcome.
I thought this was just so interesting. And according to their ability to understand. So it meant that not everybody was hearing everything. Well, they were hearing it, but they didn't understand it. And then Moses too understood only according to his capacity.
Yes.
I thought that was so interesting.
And I think that it's, again, this is, what did they hear? What was the experience like? And in this Midrash, the imagining is that, it wasn't just the Israelites who were present, right? That's also a fundamentally different understanding that the rabbis put into this, right? It's not in the text. I mean, there was an Erev Rav. There were others who came out of Egypt with the Israelites, but not necessarily representing 70 nations. That's not specified in the text. Whenever the Torah, or whenever the rabbinic literature talks about the global community of its time, or of that time, at the time of Sinai, it's always 70, right? There were 70 nations in the world, 70 different languages that were spoken. the so the 70, we can talk about the significance of the number, you can guess that it's 7 times 10, but the idea that this experience was a universal experience, that there wasn't a barrier to this experience, not even a language barrier, right? Again, go back to popular culture, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where there's the translation fish, and so that you put it in your ear and you can understand any of the galactic languages. It kind of instantly translates in your brain. Here, the voice of God, because this is what God can do, divides into 70 different voices. And that's not enough for the rabbis, right? It's not just that there were 70 languages, but that this was spoken in a way that matched the understanding of the person who was hearing it, right? That is adding on to the miraculous nature of this revelation, right? And again, please remember, Bayom Hazeh, on this day, right? That for the rabbis, it was very important to understand the revelation of Torah at Sinai as a universal event, to kind of counter the sense of, this chosen people, this unique people, this set apart by God, that this experience was open to everyone, which again goes to, why was the revelation at Mount Sinai? Why wasn't it in the land of Israel? Why wasn't it at Mount Zion in Jerusalem? Why was it? And that it's an ownerless place, right? It doesn't belong to anyone. And so nobody could say, well, we wanted to come, but the border patrol wouldn't let us in, right? We were ready to be at Sinai, but we're ready to be there for tourists. So no, it's not only could you understand it because it was in your language and at your level, but it was also in a place that was open to everyone. There wasn't a barrier, a physical barrier or a language barrier or an understanding, right? Bayom Hazeh, right? And so all of Mount Sinai, young and old, women, children, infants, right? Infants.
Does that mean that that's like a foreshadowing, or that you're going to remember, that the infant is going to remember that they were there at some point in their lives?
Yes, right? I mean, there's this beautiful story about when a child is born. Have you guys heard this story before? That there's this wonderful story about how children have full knowledge of Torah, of everything, and then an angel touch it. And this is why we have the little cleft here, or whatever it's called. Philtron. So, right? How the leopard got its spots, right? Why do we have this? Well, right? But very much that sense, and so we're again, Bayom Hazeh. So if that's true, right? That anything that we learn is a process of not just learning, it's remembering, right? And that's very important to this idea, right? In here, and that it's this, that those who take the Torah as literal truth and as the commentary on Torah as also having divine origin, use this idea of it's remembering. This is not new stuff, right? So don't think, Cohen, that you're coming up with these brilliant original ideas, because all you're really doing is remembering what was downloaded into you as an infant, and which you forgot so you could learn and grow and think that you're having these original ideas and insights into what's going on. Right? And so Moses too understood only according to his capacity. As it said, Moses spoke and God answered him with a voice. And so, right? So this is again responding to that redundancy. Well, of course, how else is God going to answer Moses? If Moses asks a question, how else is God going to do it? But with a voice, however we imagine that, with a voice that Moses could hear, right? Meaning that something that would be, right? There's a film that Ben Affleck and Matt Damon did called Dogma.
Oh, yeah.
And Jagged Little Pill, the musician, Alanis Morissette
Thomas Morrison. Yeah.
plays God.
Plays God, yeah. Stands out.
And so when she's going to open her mouth and get rid of all the bad stuff that's there, everybody, all the good people are warned, cover your ears. You can't, right? You can't, right? So it's just very interesting how this idea from the Midrash, from these teachings, gets pulled forward into modern, into popular culture.
This is a double entendre, right? With a voice that Moses could hear.
Yeah.
It doesn't just mean he's the only one hearing it. It means he hears it in a way unique to Moses.
Yeah.
In his capacity as Moses.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's parallel to, and we were reading about this last week in Baha'u'techa on the people complaining about the manna, right? And there's a midrash that says the manna, tasted like whatever your favorite food happened to be, right? So if you love chocolate, it was chocolate. If you love pizza, it was pizza, and even so, they were complaining about it.
Yeah.
Even so. And so that there's, again, God has this unique ability, and that idea plays out in so many different ways, certainly with the voices, certainly with the manna, and certainly with being created in God's image, right? From the very first chapter of Genesis, that, we're all created in God's image and we all we're all unique, right? And no human can do that. Right? If the king stamps a coin as the image, right, of the king, that every coin is going to have that same image of the king, right? Not so with God. With God stamps each of us in God's image, and each of us is unique. So this theme of God being able to create this unique experience of God for every individual is super powerful. And again, Bayom Hazeh, right? On this day. So yes, even for Moses, that he, didn't have unlimited capacity. God had to, adjust the controls, right, so that he could hear. Alana.
But why does he have to, why are people categorized here? And I noticed that men are not listed. All at Mount Sinai, young and old, okay, men could be part of that. Women, children, and infants, according to their ability to understand. Why was it necessary to categorize, or compartmentalize people?
For the Midrash, the idea is that it's all inclusive, right? So don't think that, if you think women can't understand stuff because they're women, no, they understood, right? If you think an infant has no understanding, no. Infants do have understanding, and they receive this information, this communication from God in the way that an infant can process it, however we imagine it. So it's a way of bringing together. When we get to Nitzavim in Deuteronomy, and when Moses is reading, all of you were standing there that day, this day, right? And talks about everybody who is every category of person that you would think of. This is a smaller category, but it is all inclusive when you think about young and old.
So you see it as being inclusive?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I see it as being exclusive, that people are put into.
No, so what I think is happening, no, I understand that. I understand. What I think is happening is that we have to imagine the author and the time in which this person was writing the Midrash, right? So for this person, women and children, you wouldn't expect that they would be hearing the voice of God, right? Because they're women and children.
Okay.
Right? So specifically saying, oh, no, don't think that they were not included in this.
Okay.
very much so included. So speaking to the people in his time, saying, everybody was a part of this revelation. Everybody had this experience, and it was unique to every single person. The entire multitude, right? Hershey, I saw your physical hand raise up. Do you want to? I'm going to ask you to unmute. You need to unmute yourself, Hershey. No, you're still, okay.
When you talked about God imbuing imbuing life, which is the newborn, to remember, that remembering caught me, but I think you answered it when you said, remember this day. And everything that occurs after that is what?
Well, what it brings to, for me, when you say on this day, right, that it's literally talking about this day, today, right now, June 14th, 2022. And in this moment, in this room, right, that experience at Sinai is an experience that is ongoing. And I think that's what the sages were trying to imagine. And quite frankly, jumping ahead to the punchline is really what Reform Judaism is all about, right? I mean, Reform Judaism is all about understanding that the revelation is an ongoing revelation. It's not stuck in the 2nd century or in the 6th century or in the 19th century. Wherever it is that people want to say, this is Judaism, this is Torah, and it can't be changed, right? No, that's all a part of Torah, but the whole idea is Bayom Hazeh, that it's on this day that it continues, that God continues to be revealed to us in each and every moment, right? And this Midrash, Shelley, that you pointed us to, is speaking exactly to this, right? That each of us has a unique understanding of what that revelation, what that experience is like, and where we get it, right? And it's different for everyone.
It almost sounds like it's inherent in this, that learning continues to take place. And in that sense, the learning takes place, carries on from this day at Sinai.
Yes. And it's, again, the process of remembering, right? And it's remembering in a very literal way, that is on Shavuot and on Pesach and on Sukkot. Part of the remembering is putting ourselves back in that time and place, right? We have rituals, we have actions that we perform that facilitate that transportation back to that moment so that we can experience it. And so the memory continues to be very, very powerful. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. Remember that I'm the one who brought you out of Egypt. Remember, what Amalek did to you. Remember, right? So it's not just in remembering and bringing forward the learning that was bestowed upon you before you were even born, but it's remembering these significant moments and using them as platforms to respond to what's happening in your life today.
Okay.
John? Yeah, John, and then, yeah.
Well, I'm looking at saw you at Sinai, which I think you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And this idea that Moses did not use the word standing for them because as yet these had no substance.
So point everyone to the.
It's Shemot Rabbah, forget it. Saw you at Sinai.
Yeah. So it's just, there you go. It's a page 3. And it's the text at the top of the page, right?
Yes.
And John, will you read that for us, please?
That is, wait. I was just reading.
It's in the middle.
Yeah, that is not here with us this day as a way of referring to the souls that are still destined to be created Moses did not use the word standing for them because as yet these had no substance. Still, even though they did not yet as yet exist, each one received his share of the Torah. Nor were the future prophets the only ones who received at Sinai the prophecy they were to utter. So what I was trying to get at is it's like we're part of the past and the future.
And the present.
And is Rabbi Isaac like, is this a traditional accepted interpretation?
Yeah, this comes from that same Midrash on this book of Exodus, right? And so here again, it's the rabbinic imagination understanding how is it that we are to think about this experience as it relates to us today, not just as the moment when Torah was given and now we have Torah, and we have it in the Ark and we read from it every week and that, but understanding that you were a part of something this moment of revelation that has not been repeated in the same way, right? So it's, the people standing and those who are not here with us this day. And saying, and what they're commenting on is that this change in language, it doesn't say those standing here today, those not standing here today. It doesn't have that parallel language. It says those standing with us today and those who are not here with us this day, right? And so it's not just a change in language that doesn't really have any meaning. For the Midrash, that's exactly what it means. It means that everybody who ever was and everybody who ever will be was present in that moment. And again, this is a part of the rabbinic inclination to universalize the Sinai experience, right, within the particular faith of Judaism. Stuart?
I think.
And then Shelley, I'm sorry.
Go with Shelley first.
No,
But no, by all means.
No, all I was going to say, and it's very short, is what I really liked about this one before, that everybody was there according to their ability to understand. Do you know what that means to people with disabilities?
Yeah.
I mean, that is just amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And this is, I'm glad you brought that up, Shelley, because this is about equity and not equality, right? It wasn't saying, well, we'll give, if you can't see over the fence, we'll put a block and you can see over the fence. Well, if you're in a wheelchair, you can't get on the block to see over the fence. So there has to be something else to make this situation equitable. So here, right, to make it equitable, not only was it in the 70 languages, right, but it was in a way that the person could understand. So if it says 70 languages, what if the person doesn't hear?
Right, can't see.
Right, or can't see, or whatever it is, or can't process it. Right. Say it again?
Or is unable to inquire.
Unable to inquire, yes, right?
Or brother.
Yes.
I'm through.
One thing I was going to say is, and you touched on it earlier, we've talked a lot about the day.
Yeah.
But your reference to the different holidays, the pilgrimage holidays, also refers to time. Because I think that's something that I care deeply about, that we have Shabbat to distinguish in terms of time between a sacred time and a profane time.
Yes.
Our holidays do the same thing. And it was said that when Jews gathered to study Torah, at that time, the Shekhinah would come down and her sacred presence would be upon us. So the issue of time, that is the recreating of a moment, and the idea of revelation is that it's not simply knowledge we're receiving. It's not notional, just a notional experience. It's a sacred experience. It's an experience of deity that we affirm, and we take ourselves back to recreate that moment every time we look at this and study it and are aware of it. And it's supposed to inform who we are and what we think and how we act.
Yeah, I think that's what the Torah was trying to communicate, and what the rabbis who were looking at and subsequent commentators looking at this and trying to communicate. Heschel does this beautifully in talking about Shabbat as building, creating this palace in time, and not having it being a restrictive experience, but have it being an opening experience. And I think that's again what the rabbis were trying to get us to understand, that this was not meant to be an experience that created boundaries, right? Separating the Israelites from everyone else. It created a practice, it created a relationship that was to be modeled, but wasn't exclusive to, right? And by the very nature, if everybody's hearing about this, then, in a way that, in a language they can understand, or a way that they can understand, everybody is somehow connected to this as well. And I think that's, for me, such a powerful idea, that is foundational to this experience of the Sinai experience. That it isn't bound to a particular time and place and to a particular people. Aline.
So, Rabbi, do you ever have the experience where you're speaking to the congregation and maybe somebody in the congregation who you thought was perhaps not paying attention or thinking about something else may come up to you later or send you a note that suggests they were thinking deeply about what you said, and then you're like, wow, I touched somebody who didn't look like they were engaged. And it makes me think about how we can judge what other people are taking in. And that there's so much more beyond what the eye shows us of the other in terms of what they take in, and we can't discount the experience of other people from what they learn from us.
And yeah, thank you. Because it happens in that way. It also happens where I got a note the other day from someone, not about a sermon, but about a particular situation that I helped guide and navigate. It didn't seem to me to be such a big deal, but for this person, it was huge, and huge enough to send me a handwritten note talking about the impact that it had. I had no idea. And so there's, on that end of it, to what you just said, it's taken me a long time to really understand this. I was working with bar and bat mitzvah students on the Devar tour, and I had two students in my study, and one of them we would describe in today's language as neurotypical, and the other one as neuroatypical. And I have a much different understanding, a much better understanding, and I have a basket on my table with all kinds of fidget things. Rabbi Heaps has it on her table as well, and this is something new for me. And this young person never really was able to look at me, and seemed completely distracted because they were looking at different ways. They were and pitching one thing and then putting it in and taking up another thing and putting it back in and taking up another thing and putting it back in, and just seemed like, okay, this is going to be really challenging. And then, and this person was paying attention in a way that they could pay attention, and not in the way that I would expect or hope that somebody would pay attention when I'm in conversation, certainly with a, one-on-one or the three of us together. in that setting. And it's very, I love that this Midrash brings forward that message of inclusion, right? That everybody heard according to their understanding. Everybody had that experience according to their understanding. And so you didn't have to have, a certain level of education. You didn't have to speak a particular language. You didn't have to necessarily, be able to read or any of those things that we would think of in being able to study and understand and learn and all of that. And so for me, that Sinai experience is, the paradigmatic experience of how, when we're teaching, when we're learning, when we're working with a group or with an individual, to be aware that, the way that person takes in information is probably not going to be the same way that I take in information, and what works for me. And so I think that that's part and parcel of this gift of this experience, and the gift of what the rabbis see, not necessarily with an eye towards what we're looking at, but Bayom Hazeh, in this day, this is how we understand it. That this is a message that you have to adapt and adjust to the person, to the people, to the group, and what they're able to understand and to do. Yeah, John.
Yeah, in this, it says the Aleph captures the entire Torah. And then it goes into the 10 pronouncements.
Yes.
And there's like what you're just saying, there's an assumption that you know right and wrong. And therefore, if you do wrong, you can be punished and that type of thing. But yet, the 10 Commandments are challenged.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And you have an entire book and beyond the book of Leviticus that has it as its focus of, you're gonna mess up. And when you mess up, you can fix it, right? You can repair, you can bring offerings, you can make restitution, you can seek forgiveness, you can do these things that will make it right again. Nobody's gonna get this the first time. Nobody, and that's not even the expectation, right? That because what's built into Torah is the acceptance that people are not going to be able to follow this all the time, completely, perfectly. It's just not going to happen. We're not created that way. We can't do that. And so it's not just the 10 pronouncements. And by the way, one of the things that was changed in the prayer book used to, and not just the Reform prayer, but this was from Sadia Gaon in the 9th century, took out, the 10 Commandments were part of the structure of worship as a part of a reading that would be done. And it was taken out probably for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is that you didn't want to get the false impression that all you needed to do was the 10, right? But also to recognize that even with the 10, it's a tall order, right? Some of them might be easier than others. When we think about it, don't murder. Okay, except that, it's not just talking about, according to the commentary, it's not just talking about literal physical murder. It's talking about, when you embarrass someone, it's like you're killing a little part of them, right? So that, and it's taken very much from the physical reaction that you can see sometimes. If somebody's embarrassed, what happens to their face? It gets red, right? And if it's really bad, they go completely pale, right? And that was kind of a recognition that there's something physiological that goes on, even from your words, and it's like a 60th of death. So this, thou shalt not murder is not just talking about, don't take out a gun or a knife or, hit somebody over the head and to kill them, to murder them, but be careful of embarrassing someone, of gossiping, of doing something that's going to cause the blood to drain from their face or to cause them to be so flushed that the blood's not where it's supposed to be in that way. And, and stealing, well, it's not just about stealing, I like Chuck's watch and I'm going to steal it when he's not looking. It's stealing knowledge, hiding, something from somebody that would be important for them to know. Those sorts of things. So the 10, well, they may seem like a slam dunk and okay, got it. But even this no coveting thing, right, is okay. How are we supposed to understand that? Is I like Chuck's watch. Is that coveting, or is it just simply admiring? And where's the line in that? I think we could probably come to some agreement where the line is, where I start to think poorly of Chuck because he doesn't deserve that fine of a watch. I deserve that fine of a watch. And then it kind of escalates from there. You know what? I'm going to take that watch because he doesn't deserve it. He's not worthy of that watch. Kind of building it up. So there's this sense that, and taking it out of the prayer book was a way of, okay, let's not rush to this and not focus on this alone. It's part of a whole. And it really has to be taken as a whole in this way, right? It is a lot, and it is, and so I wanted to look at, so if you look on that same page on page 3, it's the passage, it's labeled Menachot 29b, 3-5. And this is taken from the Talmud. It's Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, and this may be a familiar Midrash that this has been brought forward before. When Moses went to heaven, he found God sitting and affixing crowns to the letters of the Torah. And we see in the Torah scroll itself, there are certain letters that have the decorative, what are described here as crowns. And Moses said, Master of the universe, who detains your hand is the language literally, but why do you take so long to add these crowns to the letters, right? Why are you taking this time? Isn't it enough to just write the letters? Why are you taking this extra time? God said to him, a man will come to be at the end of many generations, and Akiva ben Yosef is his name. He will interpret on each and every tittle, piles and piles of laws. So the tittle is, again, that reference to the crown, every little marking there. He said to him, so Moses says to God, Master of the universe, show him to me. God said to him, turn around. He went and sat at the end of the 8th row. This is Moses sitting at the end of the 8th row. But Moses didn't understand the Torah they were teaching. Moses was very upset. At one point, his students said to him, that is, Akiva's students said to Akiva, Teacher, how do you know it is so? This particular lesson that he was bringing forward. He replied, it is halacha, law, that was given to Moses at Mount Sinai. And Moses was comforted. Moses then said to God, Master of the universe, you have a man of this caliber, and yet you give the Torah through me? And God told him to be silent. I love this Midrash, right? So this idea that, again, for the rabbis, it was so important to see this continuity coming forward, that everything that's being taught has already been, it's already there. It's being discovered, it's being remembered. And so the crowns on the Torah were meant to be, secret compartments that would be opened up little by little over the course of the years. And it allowed for the rabbis to do what they loved to do, which was to make the words of Torah relevant to their situation, right? To have it speak to them in their time. And that's exactly what it was doing. So you've got these, Talmudic rabbis who, in a sense, I mean, the negative way of saying they wanted to justify what they were doing. They wanted to find proof text for this. And so they saw in these markings, and they saw in Akiva, who has a whole, mythology about him, that he was illiterate until he turned 40 and began to study. And he began to study because he wanted to marry a particular woman, and the father wouldn't give her hand in marriage to somebody who is this illiterate person. And so on it goes, just having that same mythology of being a very simple person who turns into this great scholar. So for us today, in thinking about, I would encourage you to think about how it is that you experience Bayom Hazeh, right? How is it that Torah comes forward to you, that revelation comes forward to you? Part of it might be just simply in the process of the study that we do. Whether it's in a class like this, Torah study on Shabbat morning, reading a text on your own, however it is, or through experiences that you have with other people. I mean, it's, when I received that note, I said, okay, that was a pretty sacred, special moment, an opportunity where, experiencing a bit of that sacredness, that divine in that communication, it is very powerful. But I think that for us, what the rabbis were pointing to in all of these texts, and we don't have time, obviously, to go through all of them, but is that very idea that not only were we present somehow, some way in that initial revelation, but we have to be aware and present that revelation continues to unfold in us today. So I issue this challenge in thinking about this differently, not just as either it was a literal event or it was a piece of mythology that somebody made up, but that it's a story that's been a meaningful story in however people have understood it, and it is an invitation to us, Bayom Hazeh, on this day, to understand it in a way, in the language that makes sense to us, and in a way that we can understand and recognize and embracing that for all the people who are present in this class, each of us is going to experience it in a different way. And there isn't just a single way of doing it. So I thank you for this opportunity to revisit Sinai. I would invite you, many of you got the note that Marcy Siegel passed away on Monday in Tennessee. She was 99 years old, almost 100 years old. Was a stalwart of learning of Torah and just a wonderful, wonderful person. The funeral is going to be here. In typical Marcy fashion, by the way, she told her kids, this is what I want.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to do. I'm going to be buried in Chicago. My service is going to be at Temple Jeremiah. And each of you is going to speak at my service. So that's what's going to happen. So it's at 11 o'clock on Monday for those of you who are going to be able to come. The family will be sitting upon return from the cemetery here at Temple, Shiva, through the afternoon into the evening. So if you don't have an opportunity to come during the day, you can come in the evening. I believe, I'm certain that we're going to be streaming it and recording it as well. So that if you're not able to attend the service and you want to see it or hear it, you'll be able to do that as well. And this Shabbat morning, I sent out, I think almost everyone present is on the Torah study list. If you're not, let me know. But what I wanted to do was to dedicate the morning study in her memory and to talk a little bit about memory and bringing stories forward. And gave everybody an assignment to bring forward an object or something that that contains memories that are powerful and important to you forward, and it'll all make sense on Shabbat morning, I hope. Aline, you got a taste of it on last night. Just so I hope that people will be able to come. And Rabbi Heaps, prior to knowing that Marcy passed away, promised to bring lox. So we had donuts tonight.
Relax.
So Rabbi Heaps is bringing lox. So we'll have that opportunity.
The cemetery is?
Rose Hill.
Rose, is it?
It's a bit of a schlep.
Yeah. It's not an easy place to get to.
But that was, that's what you wanted. That's what we're going to do.
Marcy wants it, Marcy.
Exactly right. And always with a smile. Always with a smile. So thank you all for this opportunity. I'm so glad to have this. And Rabbi Heaps is going to be doing the next series. There was a mailer that went out with summer programming. She's going to do a 2-part service. So it went out, it should be hitting mailboxes in the next couple of days. If it hasn't, it's a trifold. It went out first class mail, so hopefully the mail service won't fail us and it'll go out. But of course, you can always find information on the website of this. And then I knew you were going to ask me.
I'm sorry.
It starts in a few weeks.
Perfect.
Not tomorrow.
We'll be ready in a
Tomorrow is though, you have a program tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow, thank you. Yes, tomorrow is a Roe v. Wade, a program on Roe v. Wade. There'll be 3 of us on the panel. Rabbi Heaps will be moderating the panel. And I'll be representing the Jews.
What does that sound like?
Judaism and the whole issue of abortion and what Judaism says about it. That starts at 7:00 tomorrow evening. And it's both in person and online, so you'll be able to do that. We're going to be in the sanctuary. Thank you. Good.
Really,
Thank you for the coffee and the
Okay.
donuts.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Why are you gonna carry 3?
Because
I'll
I
give it to
knew.
Scott, he can carry 2.
Huh? Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I shut this and I didn't end the meeting, so I'm gonna end the meeting.
I have to end the meeting.
message.
Have all this up here.